Welcome, everybody. This is a special episode of the Chow podcast today. My name is Stephen White. I'm joined by a special guest, Mr. Robert Cass. Rob, why don't you give yourself a brief introduction just so we kind of know who you are and what we can expect to hear from you.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. So, my name's Robert Cass. I work with Paramount Builders in Virginia Beach. We've got some markets up and down the East Coast, but working closely with you guys, Stephen, to just get better and basically take us to the next level. I've been in call centers from the mortgage industry to steel buildings to insurance to real estate investing, and right now we're in the home improvement side of the house. So again, it's a different product, but the you squint your eyes, everything looks the same once you take the product out of it.
Yeah, from a 20,000 foot level, we're making dials and we're setting up, opportunities, right?
Overcoming objections. Yep. And basically, long story short.
So let me just kind of give us a brief overview of what our planned topics are today. Some topics include, and it's going to be all call center related, which is why we brought our friend Rob on. Different opportunities like call center tips. We're going to be talking about types of agents to hire, paid programs, and scripts. So we're just going to kind of see where this conversation takes us with those topics in mind. But as always, we do tend to go off the rails on our planned topic gambit here. So I'll just try to guide us on this path as we have this conversation, and we'll see where it leads us. So I'm really glad to have you on today, Rob. It's I know we work just kind of daily, and we talk about the struggles of being in a call center and working with people. And just having this other opportunity for us to chat is sometimes it's cathartic. Would you say?
Without it, listen, this is as close to therapy. Let me be clear. Talking to you is as close to professional therapy or therapy for a professional that I've ever had. It's helpful. We get through some stuff. We get off topic. At the end of the day, we fix stuff, even if it's just in my mind or strictly my mind that's being fixed. Hey, we need it. It's cathartic. I guess that's my way of saying yes. It's absolutely cathartic.
Well, glad to have you on in another session here. So let's go down our first topic. What are the best types of agents to hire? It seems kind of like a pointed question.
But it seems obvious, but it's not. In my mind, it's not. And I've always had, you have those agents who come in here, they look golden. You look at them, you're like, man, they got a butter voice. They're just like, they've been in this industry. We want that industry. And they have so many broken things about them. And they've been told so many times that they're great at what they do. It's my experience has been that getting agents from another industry that have been very successful it has been, in my experience, a nightmare, because I have to unlearn some things that they learned in the 90s on how to sell. And it's like, yes, that worked very well in the 90s, but how has that served you in the last 15 years? And why are you at my door if it works so well? You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I really struggle with that. And I take the bait every time. I take the bait. I'm like, yes, I'm all in. I want that person. And then I am ultimately blown away by the person who's on the other end of the spectrum, who's like, well, shoot, I don't know if I've ever done this before. I don't know if I can do this, but I got to feed my family and I got some bills I got to pay. And they turn out to be a humble book of sponge-like learning capability where they just want to learn everything and they handle every word. It takes them a longer while to get ramped up. But this has been my experience, that those are the people that really appreciate the coaching. Maybe they've never had coaching in their life. Maybe they've never paid attention to their language, and they're learning something new as an adult or even as a young adult. When you've got that person because you have their attention, and they're like, well, I've never thought about the way that I say things, or why I would put that word before that word. I'm like, all right, I can work with this person if they're excited about it, if they have a good attitude. But really, I believe, probably incorrectly, that I can teach anybody how to do well in a call center environment. The truth is, they have to want to be willing to. If they're open to it and they're in a tough spot and they're a little bit humble, right? Because I don't know anybody who grew up at 3 years, like in third grade. The teacher's like, "What do you want to do?" "Oh, I want to work in a call center." You know what I mean? Well,
Right.
I don't know anybody who said that. So
Yeah.
we don't grow up wanting to do this, but we have to create an environment that's professional enough to give people, if it needs to be fulfilling, or you're not going to be there, you're going to be miserable. So
Yeah.
I remember that. You know what I mean? I'm sitting around adults that didn't want to do this and are there probably because something else didn't work out. That's
Yeah.
who we're seeing by and large.
So yeah, and I took a few notes while you were mentioning a few different things there. So you talked about who are the worst types of agents to hire, potentially, right? We're talking about folks that it's almost like a Trojan horse scenario where you've got somebody that has had all this experience,
Yeah.
they've got a great call center career resume, and they just seem like a real closer. And you have them come on the team, and then
How
you
can you
find
not?
out,
You have to
right?
have.
It seems like an open and book, easy deal to get someone that has that kind of experience. But
Right.
like you said, the question before, what brought them here? What happened? Where wasn't their last position good enough, or something must have happened? And it's almost like you have to find out, is this worth the chance? Because you find out they're a closed book. They've been doing this for 15 years.
Yeah.
They know more than you. And I'm doing air quotes for those of you who are listening to us here. They're the people that are kind of set in their ways, and the
Right.
challenge there is just kind of it almost feels like you have to. They're just not going to work with you.
Right.
But most of the time, there's exceptions always, and sometimes you do get the breakthrough moments where you're going to have somebody that's willing to work with the team. But it's usually an uphill battle, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. We had a guy even this year, and we're only in March right now, and we had a guy start with us in December. I was like, God, this guy is amazing. He's just great. 3 days, and he's like, hey, you know what we used to do with our leads? Here's how we used to run the leads. I don't know why you guys do this way. Hey, buddy, we're a $37 million company. We're not going to change on a dime. Why don't you figure out how this system works first? He's like, yeah, that's fine. But listen, we could do this much quicker. We get a lot more contacts. I was like, yes. Through all the things that you don't understand about the back end, everything's easy. We could just do this. And then, 2, 3 days, 4 days, through a week, 2 weeks. And one day I made a suggestion to him on the phone. I was like, hey, listen, if you did this way, and he took his headphones off and said, I don't think this is going to work out. I was like, wow. Okay. All right. Don't give feedback to the guy who has all the suggestions for us. Don't give suggestions to the person who has suggestions. But that's a way to manage out. You know what I mean? Without, let's find out now instead of later.
Yeah. Wow, that's surprising. I mean, yeah, and so switching gears to talk about those who are more open. Like you mentioned before, some of the best people to hire would be those who are like a sponge, open books, just humble, ready to learn. And I think that somebody that has that kind of a mindset, I would say maybe just like a growth mindset would be really, really helpful. Somebody that's willing to sit there and listen and at least take the feedback. And maybe that's true for a lot of different roles. I feel like call center isn't something that you particularly like. I mean, like conversations is hard to teach, right? Like,
right.
How do you teach someone how to have a conversation with someone else? It's like, well, first you say these words and then you say those words. And then sometimes if it happens in this way, you pivot a little bit. It's just a very, very strange and malleable thing to try and have a conversation about. Very meta conversation about conversation.
There are ways to find out in an interview whether somebody has a spark behind their eye. And by the way, people don't normally come to you saying, they do. Some people do. They say, hey, I have a growth mindset and I'm reading these books. So I'm like, that's great. That's awesome. It's weird. It's awkward, but it's fine. I get that. But I'll tell you one thing that I do in interviews that I love to do, because I get people who are scared to death to be in interviews, and they've only been in 2 their whole life. They're 19 or they're whatever. They've been in a job for 20 years. Now they're in front of me. They haven't done a whole lot of interviewing. I can tell them, like, well, let me ask you this. What's your favorite food? And I'll say, they'll say, whatever. I don't care what it is. I want to find something they can talk about. Well, what's your favorite restaurant? Where do you go to eat? And then they're like, oh, there's this Mexican restaurant. They have like these big glass bowls. And I'm like, that's what I'm looking for. That description, that energy is what I'm looking for. Not, I went to school here and I worked here and I did this. No. Oh, and then the burritos. Oh my God, that's what I'm looking for. If I can draw that out of somebody, I can take a snapshot of that and take a recording of that and then play it against them when they're on the phone and say, "Do you see where the gap is? We need to get there." You know what I mean? Because they
Yeah.
can't always hear it themselves, but they recognize it when they see it. They're like, "Oh wow, yeah." And I'm telling you, it's transformational, and it happens like that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
They're like, "Okay, I see what you're tapping into." But again, not everybody's into it.
It's hard to get that out of someone on a dime too. It's not like I mean, it's like that kind of energy is it's almost like a finite resource where if if left to atrophy, or if they're in the middle of a call center doing like 80, 90 calls an
Right.
hour, and they're hitting voicemail, the first time they get a conversation with somebody, it's not like you can almost, I mean, you want to find someone that can, but turning it on a dime is, it almost has to it's difficult. It's a challenge. I mean, call centers are definitely very interesting to try and manage and get around. But when you find someone that's open and has that kind of energy, you just have to kind of train it so that maybe there's like once a day you guys do a quick little maybe it's a spiff or something to try to get them to do the things that you'd like them to do. Which kind of brings me to what are some of the best maybe spiffs or perks or pay programs?
So
What are
I
some of
know
your thoughts on that?
yeah, I know my chain of command would cringe. But one of them is time off. You know what I
Time
mean?
off,
It's
right?
like, hey, you can leave a half hour early, you know what I mean, on Friday if we hit these metrics. Like half hours on Friday is worth every bit of $50, $60 cash. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
Friday
Mm-hmm.
rolls around, especially this time of the year, it's nice out. They know it's gonna be nice out. They're making plans. You can get a lot of mileage off of a half hour early on Friday. Food is always a great one. We do we do Taco Tuesdays. I set a pretty healthy goal. I'm amazed at how often they hit it, so I have to keep increasing the goal, which is really
I mean,
that's
that's a good problem
for
to
me,
have, right?
that's success. Problem is, I mean, it's like you got to keep it fresh as well. So I try to get it out of reach, and but food for sure. Um,
Food, time off, sometimes just
and
cold hard cash, I feel like is a good one. I remember we used to do things like I mean, we set a goal for, every so and so amount of set appointments. I would set goals for myself to try and shoot for a certain amount of, sometimes it's intangible. I mean, there's good spiffs to have that are kind of like a tangible goal, but just to kind of keep your mindset, keep your mind going. I mean, there's just going to be dry days here and there where it's just like you have a couple, you're just not getting a lot of good conversations.
right,
I remember I would set a personal goal for myself where I would just say, I just want to leave that conversation with that other person feeling a little better about themselves, or maybe just I want to make that other person smile after this conversation's done.
oh nice,
It sounds like a silly thing to do, just kind of like saying it out loud. But gosh darn it, I've had some good conversations with people. Did all of them turn into appointments? Probably not. But at least I left conversations with people thinking about the company I was working for in a better light than when I had started. If I had had a
right,
good conversation, kind of sparked that conversation where, because most of the time when you're dealing with people that need these home improvements, they're older folk. They're cautious, right? There's somebody that's
right,
kind of like they see news stories about this spam call, this other thing that's happening,
yep,
and so when you get on the phone with them, it's not like they're looking to, well, they have this big barrier first off. So you
right,
introduce yourself, they're like, oh yeah, sure, you're actually some guy that's just trying to get through my information.
right, exactly,
That's what you're dealing with for the first night. If I just prove I'm a human that cares, if they mention the family, or if they mention something like that, I just kind of want to at least latch onto it a little bit to let
right,
them know, hey, I'm human too. Hey, you're human.
yep,
I know I just got to you in the middle of you're watching Seinfeld on a
yeah.
Thursday afternoon rerun on TV Land.
And
And
you talked about some of the hard things to teach people, and what I tell people is there's so much information in a lead, and it's not that they want a roof or that they want, that there's information in their email address. Like, I like Jeeps at gmail.com. Hey, if you're a Jeep guy, have a damn conversation about a Jeep. You're a tech, like, read their email address. There's so much information in there.
Uh-huh.
That's going to give you a lead in. Babies crying in the background, dogs, whenever there's always something going on. Don't drive into the call and not have your other senses aware of what's going on, because there's so much communication that's happening. But if you're just looking for a question and answer, I call it an interrogation versus a conversation. Don't have
Uh-huh.
a yes no conversation. Do you need a roof? They might as well be in a cinder block room basement with a light hanging down from the ceiling with their arms duct taped to an old desk chair. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
that's what it feels like when you're
Right.
having those yes no conversations. It's like, have a conversation, learn the art of language and the art of communicating, because you don't talk to your kids like that, or your wife or your spouse or the police officer. Well, nothing. You have dialogue and you go through it. And by the way, people just like me right now can't
Uh-huh.
shut themselves up. If you ask them the right questions and you study your trade, they're going to give you all the qualifying questions if you're adept enough to guide that conversation to where they're giving you information without you asking for it. But if you're dumb enough to just ask yes, no questions, it's going to be a hard road.
Yeah. What are some of those, what would you say are some of the good qualifying questions? Like, if we were to craft something about, I don't know, um, maybe Windows or something, what
Again,
would be,
it's the most basic thing. I don't care what you're selling. So tell me what's going on. What's got it? Why are we talking today? You know what I mean?
uh
That's not a no. It's not a
right.
yes. It's a, well, and people typically don't say, I just need a roof. And
Yes. Right.
and the funny thing is that there mannerisms and things that we've been ingrained for millions of years to have that dialogue. So if we ask a question and have the intestinal fortitude to shut the hell up,
Uh-huh.
they're going to fill the space. If they really need something, they're gonna, because even if they're a rude person, they're gonna fill in the space with their own voice because it's uncomfortable. But we have to
Yeah.
be comfortable in that silence and disciplined enough to shut up, ask a question, and have a hard stop at the end of it. Hey, so what's got you calling in today? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So funny thing about the allowing the uncomfortability of silence. I've built some of my previous scripts I've used for a couple call center situations. I've actually built in these pauses into the script. Um, it's hard to get someone to actually pause when they're in the moment talking to a live person on the other line. It's
Yeah.
it's almost impossible, I would say.
Right. Salesmen want to talk. They want to hear their own voice. They want to tell. Telling is not selling. I used to tell them that all the time. Telling is not selling. Shut the hell
It
up.
it rhymes even. I mean, it seems like an
Well,
easy thing to stick. I know one of the books I was reading, this has been like a couple years ago. It's like The Power Habit. Might have been that one or something else. I can't remember exactly, but I know that it mentioned something about the power of like rhyming when you're trying to get someone to
interesting.
something to stick. And it was, I'd have to go and review some of the old when I used to drive between a lot of places and listen to audiobooks. So like I would listen to like 7 Habits for Life and like Power Habit, all this self-help type stuff. Just very interesting stuff to kind of fill the void of driving for between appointments or whatever, what have you. And it was just kind of like this, what you mentioned before, like this, telling isn't sell. What was it again? It said telling isn't selling.
Yeah, telling isn't selling.
Right. So that's like things like that tend to stick a little bit better. I know, this actually doesn't have anything to do with rhyming, but something one of my old callers used to say, when we'd make some odd suggestions, like when, people always would say, what's the worst that could happen? She would always say, well, what's the best that could happen? And I was like, I like that optimistic attitude. What is the best that could happen? I guess I set an appointment, right? All right, I'll go for it. And I try to call a person back that just hung up on me or something. And it's funny, even when you call someone back that just hung up on you and they answer the phone, I'm like, oh, we just got disconnected. And they say, no, I hung up on you. And I'm like, well, why'd you answer the phone?
Listen, but that's a perfect example. Like, I hear, like, if you're in a call center, you can't hear the person clicking, but you can hear somebody stop mid-sentence. And you're like, oh, huh. I'm like, never am I not going to call that person back. And 9 times out of 10, they don't in my experience, when I do this, they don't pick up. But I'm like, hey, I'm so sorry. I have a new phone system. I still haven't worked it. I was trying to switch my headphones off. I am so sorry. That was the rudest thing that's ever happened to me or that I've ever done to somebody. You know what I mean? Let them know this has been rude. You'd be amazed at how many times they get people calling back. I was like, hey, I'm just reaching out because I wanted to try to see if I could help you out. I am blown away by when you do what I call standing people up, when I stand them up, how much they say, you know what, I'm having a bad day. I'm sorry about that. That was, it actually wasn't you, it was me. And then you have a conversation. 99% of my reps have never had that intestinal fortitude to push back in a very healthy way. Because when you don't call back, it says, I have low sales. I have my own terms, by the way, low sales self-esteem. It means I have low sales self-esteem. I either don't believe in my process, I don't believe in the leads, or I don't believe in the product. But if I do, I'm going to call you back up. Hey, listen, I truly think that we're the best. We may not be the best option for you, but we're a really good option. And I believe that. And if you're really interested, let's talk. Let's have a conversation. And by the way, I'll leave that voicemail. That's a different voicemail than they're going to get from another call center. You know what I mean?
It's so powerful to stand out.
Right, exactly. Observe the masses and go the other way. That's why I love non-radio voice. As soon as I meet somebody with a radio voice, I'm like, get that out of the way. That worked in the 90s. People want authenticity on the phone. They want to hear a scratch in your voice. They don't want to hear you say and all the time. I'm okay with it for a little bit. Because, if you don't, it's too clean. It's not authentic. So I'll put in I don't know. I mean, that's a great question. I'll find out, but nobody's ever asked in that way.
So here's something that one of my previous mentors, when they would talk about the kind of strategy for when you're talking on the phone. I know we're kind of getting into like best scripts and methods for delivery. So this is one of our topics. We're just naturally flowing through what we were going to talk about, which is great. But the thing that he mentioned was, and this might be something more so for the older crowd, is Columbo. I don't know if you remember that show Columbo, right? He'd be like, something that's kind of bothering me here, this thing that kind of stood out to me. I'm doing a terrible Columbo impression, but I'm giving it my best shot. But he would stop and kind of like come from such an unassuming, like so non-threatening, that's the kind of thing we want to embody when we're on the phone with people. It's kind of unassuming, non-threatening. Just before we hang up, I just had one thing that didn't quite, you mentioned, and then you go into something, the pain of the situation. You mentioned that you weren't able to open the windows, so that seems like could be a problem. Is that going to get any better over time? And they're like, well, no, it's not going to get better. And then you start having that conversation. You're like, hey, I guess it wouldn't be such a bad idea maybe to just kind of see down the road what we could do. And, is that a bad idea? And they're like, well, I guess no, it's not a bad idea to have someone come and take a look. And then pretty soon you're setting up stuff.
You're mentioning little things that, I understand scripts, and I like scripts in the form of ideas. Here's the idea of what we're trying to do. Make it yours. So you just said something like, when you realize it, and you're not creating pain, you're trying to fix somebody's pain. Because listen, all sales is fixing a pain. If there's no pain, it's tough to get people to move. There's no leverage, right? So the pain, when we find out what that pain is, that's the fulcrum that allows us to push on one side to get the other person to move. So it drives me nuts when people don't even find out what they're calling about. What's going on? Oh, my roof's leaking. Okay, we can fix your roof. No. Well, tell me about that. Like,
we got the deals. Do you want the 20% or 50%? And then they're like, all right, whatever.
But when you find out that, oh my God, it's dripping into their kid's room and there's mold on the walls, you're like, you got to get that baby out of there. You know what I mean? We got to get that fixed. That's a real thing. Look it up. Black mold, it is what it is. We got to get in there before it becomes a real problem. And look, whether you do business or not, you got to get us in there. Because now, when the conversation becomes, well, nah, not right now, I'm not interested. You're not interested in what? In your baby's health? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
But if you don't go there and you don't find it out, then you have zero leverage. You're like, okay, I'll call you back tomorrow and see if you're interested in the party. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's such a different conversation. That I always build that into scripts that we put together. It's a focus on questions, like kind of what questions or how questions that'll bring out something that'll help with getting down to the pain. And we used to always call it digging at the pain.
Right.
And it is something that you would mention in a conversation. Like for instance, a pain question for a roof. You mentioned it, right? Leaking. Pain question for like bathrooms would be, as you have somebody older, like an older home. So let's say you have like a mother or father, they're in their 70s or their 80s, and they're scared. They're scared to use the shower because they have to climb over the tub to take a shower. So common. They feel like they've lost their self-worth, their dignity, because they don't have the power to even bathe themselves anymore because they have a tub they have to climb over. And, sure, you installed the handrail to help them give that opportunity to climb over, but it's still scary. It's something that they don't want to have to worry about on a day-to-day basis.
That's free
Let's do this for your
information.
mom. Let's do this for your dad. Let's help take care of it.
It's free information if we ask for it, and I can't believe we don't ask for it. My thing is this: when I'm on the phone or when I'm in front of somebody selling, I have cards in my hand. It's a card game. That's all it is.
Okay.
And the customer has their cards too. The cool thing is, ethically, morally, and legally, we can freeze time and look at their cards. We can look at the lead. We can ask them questions to force them to play their cards and show us what their cards are, right? So it's just a game. I want to know how many cards you're playing against so I know which cards to play, because the default move is whatever game we're playing, and tell me if your experience is different with call center reps, they're going to throw their aces down. Bam, bam. Well, guys, you know what I mean? You don't have to do that.
It's a challenge. I usually use I like the card analogy. Maybe this is an older analogy, but I'd use it like you have a gun with so many bullets in your chamber, right? And let's say you've got to worry about playing them. Let's use a card analogy because I think it works. You got a 7-card hand. There's been too many shootings lately. Let's not worry about that. Let's get it out of the way. But you got your cards. You got 7 cards in your hand. One of your cards is the deals, right? You got these great deals for the company. You don't want to just come out and be like, boom, deals, Right. I feel like it's like you're playing your card a little too soon. You want to play it a little close to the chest. If you need like a final closer, that's when you bring out the deals card. But you also want to find out what cards they're playing with. So you start asking the questions, like getting the pain questions out. Pain's a free card. If you want to research that, that's a free card you can get from them once you find out why they wanted that in the first place.
Right.
You find out, bathroom, you find out window, whatever their problem is with the windows in the bathroom. Like the energy problem with the windows, or rather it's a safety issue, or there's the mold or the mildew, or the tiles are cracking, or whatever. You find that and you really go, oh, hey, that's a great card. Hey, that's a pretty good card you got there. Let me go ahead and play that down. Find out something about that.
Yep.
If you go straight to, and this is the most, it makes me cringe every time I hear it. Just say, oh, it's free. The appointment's free. I feel like it's such a cheap out way to get the appointment. And I think people have wised up to it. At least from what I've heard on phone calls, it seems like they're like, yeah, of course it's free. I'm coming to a timeshare. I don't want a timeshare come out of my house. So it's a challenge. It's a challenge there.
Yep. What's your lesson?
Wow. Oh man, we went over so much stuff today. I feel like we 30 minutes already went by so quick. Thank you so much for joining us today, Rob. I do appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day just to come in and have a quick conversation with us here on our podcast. And I feel like we touched on a lot of great subjects, and we had a lot of great as far as like, maybe we got a few ideas that came out of this conversation we want to try to explore. And hopefully, if you're listening today, you got a couple ideas you want to try to use for your call center. As always, we are technology agnostic. I'm not sure what the exact wording is for our end script here. I'm kind of winging it on the fly. But I'm happy you guys got to listen in, and hopefully we'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks for joining.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.